Bottomline Africa. We now want to shine a spotlight on the East African integration agenda with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni in Kenya for a 3-day state visit, one that has seen both the presidents of the countries come up with ties that would boost bilateral trade between the two countries. In studio to explain more on this is governance expert Brian Mutia. Brian, thank you for joining us on Bottomline Africa.
Thank you, Michelle.
Let's begin with this somewhat historic visit, really, of Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni to the country. A lot of deals have been signed since he landed in Kenya 2 days later. What do you make of the progress so far?
Thank you, Michelle. I think one thing that viewers need to understand in terms of bilateral and multilateral engagements is that during bargains or during such kind of negotiations, it's all about give and take.
Right.
Leaders will look at what they are going to gain and what is of their interest. And therefore, in this kind of negotiation between the president and our president and Bwana Museveni of Uganda, it's all about their interest. And what befits them is what they feel like they want to take home on that one. For example, if you look at what Kenyans are saying that, we did not need to give Museveni our land in Naivasha for a dry port, they need to interrogate the agreement further and understand what did Kenya gain. And I think this should be in the public domain that, of course, Kenya has also to benefit from this kind of bilateral agreement. So it's not all about losing. It's all about gaining from whatever discussion you have, whatever negotiation you have. This is a track one negotiation at the apex level of leadership, where two leaders of the state come together to negotiate on behalf of their subjects. And therefore, this being such kind of an arrangement is not the first one. Remember, Michelle, I want to make it clear that Kenyans need to understand that Uganda is one partner that they cannot lose at all. Look at the volume of business that we conduct as a country with Uganda. I'll tell you that over 15 billion shillings in terms of what we gain from Uganda relationship annually, it's not something that we need to joke around. And therefore, when you hear people talking about, we did not need to part with our land, or the issue of Migingo has not been resolved, look at what you gain from your, the other party, other than what he gains from you.
All right, and let's speak about that Migingo issue, because I understand the two presidents have decided to form a commission of inquiry that will look into Migingo, but it's been about 10 years of us speaking of a commission into inquiry. Earlier this morning, I spoke to the Nyatike Member of Parliament where Migingo Island is, and he says many of these commissions really do not bear fruit. Was it in order? Because many citizens of both countries expected that the Migingo issue would be top of the agenda. How would you describe the manner in which the two presidents handled this?
Of course, it featured. The issue of Migingo featured, although in a very light way.
Right.
It never, took the center of discussion. And that means that it's not a big issue to them because they look at the bigger picture other than the smaller picture in this aspect or in this kind of bilateral relationship between these two countries. And I'll tell you for free that, it might be a social issue or a socio-economic issue to the people who live around that rocky area.
Right.
But I want to tell you that when heads of state come and meet, they project their mindsets to further horizons and look at what are the bigger issues that need to be discussed or what are the bigger issues as a subject matter. And I can tell you that, it might have brought a frosty relationship between the two countries, but it occupies a very small space within the two bilateral setup of the two countries. And therefore, the president and his counterpart at the Uganda side could have felt that it is not a big issue that perhaps need to be discussed at this point. Otherwise, they had delegated the responsibility to a commission or a committee that has been handling the issue, although it has not been, handled fully or to the success of it or to the end tail of it. But I do believe that with time, I think it shall come to pass. The solution shall come to be obtained from this kind of negotiation. Although it might, drag as it has, but at the end of the day, once these two countries commit to reaffirm their commitment towards addressing the issue, to me, I think they shall get some solution.
Now, the two presidents today visited the port of Mombasa, which is a crucial gateway in terms of boosting bilateral trade as well as trade within the East African region. And after that, Yoweri Museveni is expected to make his way from Mombasa to Nairobi on the SGR train. Now, that trip alone is viewed as a major endorsement, perhaps, of the extension of the SGR from Kenya to Uganda. Uganda. Talk to us about how that is likely to play out.
As you have rightly put it, it's a major,
an endorsement.
A kickoff or an endorsement from an head of state. And remember, this is the first head of state to ride on such kind of infrastructure ever since it was established. So it is, to me, it's historical. And it reaffirms the commitment of the government that it's going to extend a warmer relationship between these two countries. And in cementing that their positions as two trade partners in East Africa, cooperation setup. And again, it is also a commitment that the government is actually trying, the two countries are actually alive to the fact that they are living to the dream of an East Africa integration, setup, where we are talking about a borderless East Africa, a borderless Africa, where at the end of the day, men and women of these two great countries and the larger African continent are able to transact, commute, and suffer the same kind of fate as far as the tariff regime is concerned. And to me, I think that's a plus, because we have been fighting about how do we make this a reality. Although it might be easy said on paper, Michelle, I'm afraid to say, because when you go to the ground, these issues of free movement of people sometimes becomes a problem. Because when you go to the ground, you find that what is on paper, what has been declared to be the ideal situation, it becomes a mirage, where you find people are still suffering in terms of engagement on how to move goods from point A to B, and that therefore defeats all the whole aspect of free movement, borderless East Africa state, and so on and so on.
All right. Now you mentioned that bilateral agreements are meant to benefit the citizens of whichever country is involved. But among the agreements that have been signed among these two leaders is the resumption of exportation of poultry products, the exportation of sugar from Uganda to Nairobi, to Kenya rather. But before that, we've already had Kenyans complaining, especially poultry farmers, that they have nowhere to sell their eggs. We have sugarcane farmers saying they have nowhere to sell their sugar. So who really is benefiting from these agreements? I
think Kenyans, with all due respect, are a peculiar lot, because they are the same people who are crying that they need free movement of goods and the services here and there, free movement of their people from Uganda point A to B. And then when such kind of, a diplomatic or bilateral agreement is brokered, then they are the first ones to make noise about, where are we going to sell our poultry? When, to me, I think the dialogue between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Museveni is actually a milestone towards actualizing the dream of free movement of goods and the people across the two countries and also East Africa. So it's the honors of the people also to make use of the existing markets in the other country, and stop crying wolf, or let them stop crying victims here, because once the transactions is free for all to contact, then what are they doing? They also need to transact. If Uganda is actually bringing more eggs here in Kenya, let them also find markets within the bigger East Africa community and also sell their goods, because the openness of the trade markets, the free border movement is so a dream of East Africa integration. Right.
Let's bring in another East African country, because earlier this month we saw President Uhuru Kenyatta head over to Kigali, where he met Rwandan President Paul Kagame. On his way back to Kenya, he passed by Kampala, where he spoke to President Yoweri Museveni. Now, we understand Uganda and Rwanda are in a serious border row as we speak. Is President Uhuru Kenyatta, through this state visit, engaged in some kind of shuttle diplomacy between the two countries?
Absolutely. It's a good issue that the president is actually doing by driving an agenda of harmony or harmonious East Africa, state or bloc. And this frosty relationship between countries is a normal thing, Michelle, I must say, because historically all countries, owing to the issues of border conflicts and also the movement of people from one country to another. It's an issue that has been, historical with us. And these sporadic, issues arising from one country to another. It's something that we have to learn to live with it. But we have to learn on how to mitigate these issues. Remember, Michelle, before the colonial masters came over, we were a borderless Africa, where communities could stay or live with each other harmoniously without any problem. But with the entry of the colonial boundaries and so on and so on, we found ourselves, actually, we found our cousins and our sisters on the other side of the continent, or the other side of the country. And that, of course, does not kill the whole East Africanism in us, in terms of culture, in terms of movement, like pastoral cultures, where you find that a Kenyan as relatives in Somalia. When you bring a border here, you are killing that, setup, that family fabric. You are killing it. But you have to learn on how to mitigate this issue, because when you learn the issue of Uganda and Rwanda, it's all about movement and the interest they have also on the other side of DRC, Congo. And the whole idea need to be resolved in a diplomatic manner. And therefore, the role of President Kenyatta as one of the key men within the East African bloc is actually to ensure that the younger democracies also are able, to live with each other harmoniously. So to me, I think it's a plus for President Kenyatta to shuttle that and make sure that these countries are able to, severe the, they bring out the tension that is existing between them.
All right, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out, as well as what more deals will be signed between Kenya and Uganda. But let's bring in Burundi, which is also an East African country, and we want to focus on the fact that there are schoolgirls that were arrested in Burundi who are all minors under the age of 18 for doodling on the president's photo. Now, the president's photo is on school books, on public schools in Burundi, and these girls doodled on the president's photo and were later charged on March 18th with insulting the head of state and facing up to 5 years in jail if they were convicted. The girls have now been released. But let's speak about this lack of freedom of expression in Burundi and what that really means for the East African community.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a good question. First of all, let me say that Burundi just promulgated their constitution the other day, 7th of June 2018.
Right.
And some of the elements within the constitution is those freedoms being inculcated within the supreme laws of the country.
Right.
And Burundi being President Nkurunziza being the first one to break such rules or to disrespect such provisions of the constitution, to me, it's unfortunate. You need to be reminded that the African Charter on the Rights and the Welfare of the Child and Article 7, of course, expresses or gives those provisions of expressions of freedoms of these children. And also the same article, under Article 16 of the same charter, of course, talks about the protection of child welfare and the issue of going overboard and locking these young underage children in a jail. To me, first of all, it's a low moment for African democracy, because even the United Nations Human Rights Convention gives all these provisions, under Article 12 and Article 13, Article 14, all the way to Article 20, where the expressions, these freedoms are domiciled, and they are there to protect the welfare of the child.
All right.
And therefore, Burundi should actually be ashamed of itself through President Nkurunziza for taking such an action. Although the kids have been, released from jail after, had a public outcry and, the bigger global outcry. First of all, I think you need to be cautioned that is not above the law when it comes to international law. And whatever action he's doing today will be actually used as a judgment for his actions tomorrow.
But will it, Brian? Because it's not the first time this has happened. Minors being arrested for something as trivial as doodling the president's face. This also happened in 2016. Authorities still arresting school children doodling on images of the president on their school books. A 13-year-old girl was in fact among those who were arrested, but she was released for being below the age of criminal responsibility. It also happened back in 2016-15, I believe, where hundreds of children were actually expelled from schools, again, for scribbling on the president's face. So we are saying, why not just remove the president's face from these books to begin with, if he doesn't want that? But we're seeing this recurring year in, year out. What does this mean in terms of accountability, even within the wider regional and international level?
Sure. This is blatant disrespect of human rights. And a child is a child, no matter how old, as long as that child has not attained the age of the majority, and that's the age of 18 years. And no matter whatever terminology you want to say, that it's a repetitive sort of issue, and you are taking this action just as a punitive measure to the children. Children are protected by these rights that I've actually outlined, Michelle. And the moment you deviate from this